Hi, I'm Olivia, and I'm going to be responding in this video about Module 5, where we read about James Thurber and Ernest Hemingway. I'm going to be giving some of my own opinions about what I read and just giving kind of a breakdown on what I read through. So, to start with, I just want to say, even though their stories are, very different and, their tones and styles are some of them are connected in ways, but different, relatively just on the surface. What affected me most with it was how each one made me think about human emotions and relationships, especially how people deal with fear and communication and self-identity. It really just made me think about um, how it's different for each person and how each person handles it and feels it and thinks about it and just things kind of like that, um how fear can make people defensive and avoidant, and the self-identity part, it can make people change things about them and who they are and how other people notice them. So that was just a thought I had. I just thought it kind of connected with everything and just wanted to point that out. I want to first talk about James Thurber's story. It really captured my attention because it his story focused on a character, Walter Mitty. That's the story I'm talking about. Sorry. It focuses on a character who escapes into his imagination, and the main character, he retreats, pushes himself back into daydreams where he imagines himself as confident and heroic and important in his world, and even though in real life he's overlooked and insignificant in his world. And that made me reflect on how people, including myself sometimes, use imagination or fantasy to cope with moments when life feels dull and discouraging. And to me that felt both it's almost funny in a way, not funny haha, that it's just that way, but it's also sad and bittersweet in a way because it showed how powerful the inner world can be when reality feels unsatisfying to someone and they don't know how to handle it that well, so they lock themselves away into something others can't recognize. And I just also want to mention, it also made me think about how others treat people who seem quiet or just normal, and how easy it can be to underestimate someone in their life, if you don't know them. Even though James Thurber, he writes with almost a comedic sense, it he blends um comedy and the perception of depth, like and really, and that left an impression on me enough to say something about it. um and I just think that's also an important thing for to write about, especially for writers, because it shows something that to some people it could be hard to express that. And then next, I want to bring up Ernest Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants. Um, this story affected me in a different way from James Thurber's because, unlike Thurber's, almost like imaginative. That's a big word for me. And he's like these daydream worlds and dream like realities that he makes. Hemingway's story focuses on what's left unsaid, and the characters never like explicitly say what they're talking about, but it's clear like from their conversations that they have, that they're discussing, it's clear that they're talking about a life-changing decision in them. And the tension, it comes like not, it doesn't come from action, but it comes from what each character doesn't say and how they communicate around problems that they're afraid like to face head on. And to me, this whole story, it felt like very real to me, because in in the world and life, there's like so many times when people will avoid saying what they truly mean, like whether they're scared to hurt themselves or hurt someone else, or like if it's a hard truth to say. And the frustration of like trying to interpret someone's words and their like true intentions, it made me feel like more connected to the girl in the story. uh she seems torn like between pressure and her own desires. The story made me like reflect on how difficult communication can be, and that's something like I completely get and like can connect with, like especially with sensitive topics. And because that's something that most people experience in relationships, or like just difficult conversations. And in my personal life, I've dealt with that a long time. So that part of the story, and like there's that fact on it, it really made me like think, because I can see that. Another Ernest Hemingway story that I want to bring up that we read about in this module, The Short Happy Life of Francis Macomber. Um, it really, when I was reading it, it got me thinking about, the first thing I thought about was like courage and identity. That was two things that I could like take away from the whole thing. Um, the story, it has a wealthy man named Francis Macomber on a safari, and because of like a moment of fear that he had earlier on, he felt ashamed and like dominated, and like both in his marriage and his own self, and um the way he like seen himself. And over time, like over the course of his time in the safari and his hunt, he like begins to find courage and confidence, like even though it's difficult and complicated, the whole thing is. And what stood out to me emotionally was like that brief moment of bravery. It made him feel more alive, even if it was just a short moment. And that emotional shift in the story, it made me think about how moments of like personal growth, they come with it comes with fear and conflict and sometimes like loss, like whether it's something that you held close, or like a person, or really just anything. and and like really how complicated human relationships can be. And the story also highlights issues like power dynamics almost, like between people and how fear and like or courage, like how they shape and like make connections and how we like connect with others based on that. And like I feel like those themes are still like very relevant today and with how people are today. I also just wanted to add in if I had to like pick who I identify with the most, I would choose the characters from Hemingway's stories like more than Thurber's, because in both of them that I brought up, Hills Like White Elephants and The Short Happy Life of Francis McComber, they both deal with emotional tension, fear, uh, like difficult choices in their lives and in ways like something important, in ways that they feel like very human, and that's important and like real. And I think most people have like uncertain or like they're afraid of facing those important things, and that fact, it just like resonated with me more. But like at the same time, James James Thurber's like use of imagination, like I said earlier, it also made me reflect on how sometimes we like escape reality, and I think that is another like global like universal experience with a bunch of people. I think I think you'll find a bunch of people who have at least like one time in their life has like in their mind escaped reality, doing anything to just not face the problems head on that they are facing in that moment, whether it's like going on a vacation or breaking it off with a person or meeting new people or just like doing anything that people like, or I mean sometimes maybe it's bad things that happen that people do to escape reality. Sometimes people get into bad habits like drinking or drugs and stuff like that, but that's their escape from reality. And it's not just one way, and I think that's why it's a universal thing, because it's different, but it's all under the same umbrella for everyone, that they experience that sort of escapism. And just to note, all three of these stories that I talked about, they are absolutely still relevant to today. James Thurber's stories remind us that imagination and like inner selves, inner life, they're important. Everyone daydreams, like I said, or at least think about themselves or like ourselves in different roles or different lives in their minds if we're not content with the one we have now. And Hemingway's stories, they show how communication and courage and relationships, they're central, very unifying to the human experience. Many people today still struggle with expressing themselves and what matters most to them, and or expressing fears that they face or understanding other people's motivations. And I don't think these themes, they don't belong to the past when these stories were written. They're literally a part of how people live and interact today, and I think that's important that we keep that. So overall, module 5, it like introduced me into a very like deep kind of mindset with these stories. They made me think about how people cope with fear how communication like breaks down, and how even like brief moments of courage, even if it's like very short, that one tiny thing of courage, it can change a person. It can do a complete 180 and change how you think, how you feel, and the way you do things. And I think these kind of reflections are very important, like, to stay with, like, not just me, but like for everyone, really, because we all experience these kinds of things. So, like, even if others don't read these stories, it's still important that these kind of reflections stay, like, beyond just reading the words on the page. And so that is my wrap on Module 5. Thank you.